I have to tell you, a restaurant is a very tricky investment. More than half of them go under within the first 6 months. If I were your accountant, I'd have to strongly advise you against it.
You would, huh? Well, you're not my accountant.
No, I mean, if I were your accountant...
I told you. I took you out here...
No, I'm just saying that it's a very, very tricky business, and if I were your accountant, I would really strongly have to advise you against it as an accountant.
You're not my accountant.
I realize I'm not your accountant. If I were your accountant.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. Let's face it, we all have a relationship with money. That's what this show is about. Our experiences with money, the mistakes we make and learn from, the opportunities we take advantage of, the things we splurge on. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for checking out the show. Now, money is the thing we all have in common. That's what the show is about. But if you're an entrepreneur, or you know someone who is thinking about entrepreneurship in any way, this episode is one to bookmark, because my guest today is Dan Simons. He is the co-founder of Founding Farmers, a restaurant group that opened their first location in Washington, D.C. in 2008. They have since opened up more locations in D.C., Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. In fact, we recorded this conversation at their newest location right here in Alexandria. It was lunchtime, so you're going to hear some background noise because the restaurant's open for business. Dan grew up in Massachusetts. Both of his parents were doctors, and as you will hear, we had a very candid conversation about money within families, with parents, spouses, children. He shares some really good stories about business and, as I indicated, great takeaways for entrepreneurs. So let's get to it with Dan Simons. What's the earliest memory you have of money?
The earliest tangible memory I have of money is rolling change. In, nickels, dimes, quarters, whatever.
Right.
And
you go to the bank, you get those little...
Yeah, you get the paper rolls.
Yeah.
And my mom would let me... make me, but tell me, but let me, roll those loose change, and I would put them in those things, into those little paper rollers, and then I would get a piece of the action when we would take it to the bank and turn it into dollars.
Nice. That's a good, this is before...
I'm 54, so this is the 70s.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is before... I'm blanking on the name of the company, but the company that
the change machines. This was decades before the change machines.
Where you would go and just dump all your change, and it would do that.
Sure, those machines when they came out, I was fascinated. That's brilliant, but I actually think, I don't know, from a little nostalgia standpoint, they actually sort of destroyed a tangible appreciation and understanding that little things add up to something big.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like it might have been your first job, but what was your first official job when you were a kid, maybe a teenager, something like that?
So my first job working for a company, I was 14, and I worked for a department store as a stock boy in the linens department.
Wow, so you're one of the rare people who actually knows how to fold a fitted sheet. Oh,
yeah, and I knew how to open cardboard boxes and how to, stock stuff in, the attic warehouse, and then how to open those things in the department. I'm not actually sure we were allowed to fold the fitted sheets, but we were, handing them to the people who would. 14 years old, I think I was making, $2.75 an hour.
Right, which was probably minimum wage at the time.
Yeah, solid.
How long did you do that for? Was that a summer job?
No, I did that during the school year in 9th grade, 2 days after school, and then in the summer.
And I'm assuming you didn't stay at that job all through high school. I'm assuming somewhere along the way you moved on to something else.
Correct. I think I worked there for about a year, and then most of my work was, painting houses in the summer, mowing lawns, painting houses, shoveling and snow blowing.
Because you got all the seasons.
Yeah, growing up in Boston, there's plenty of manual labor to be done, and but it was definitely work. In the summer when we were painting houses, be at the job site at 7:30 or 8, work all day. I loved it.
There is something about that type of job, and I'm not knocking the first job that you had as a stock boy, but there is something satisfying about painting a house, shoveling snow, just the immediate results of your work are there.
I definitely learned to hate the work, love the outcome. So I hated mowing the lawn.
Right.
But I loved looking at the lawn.
Right, once it's done.
After, and then walking on, playing wiffle ball in bare feet on a freshly mown lawn is glorious. So I think that was a valuable lesson.
You don't stay in New England for college. You go to George Washington University. International Business Administration, is that what your degree was in?
Yes.
Was that something you knew going in, I'm going to study business, or did you take a couple of years to sort of figure out, I'm not sure what I want to major in?
I knew I wanted to study business, and I knew I wanted to do something international. Both my family's not from the U.S., so both my parents are from London. My sisters were born there. My brother and I were born here. But so I didn't have any relatives in the U.S. So when I went to college, doing something international I just thought would be cool, and I had relatives and those resources, and I loved work and making money, and so business was just a natural thing. And I'm also I wasn't going to be a finance guy, and I wasn't going to be a computer science guy. There's some stuff I don't have the cognitive horsepower for, so business was a good spot for me.
I get the computer science stuff. You strike me as someone who, if you have the mental capacity to have a degree in finance and to make a career in finance and investment and that sort of thing, and I'm assuming there's something about business that you find more attractive.
Well, I'm actually a realist about cognitive horsepower. My siblings are intelligent. My brother is off the charts intelligent. So there is a difference between what people with different human brains are cognitively, capable of. So I was, as I watched my brother build his first computer when he was 12 and I was 10, and I watched him sell his first piece of software, at 12 or 13, I was well aware, I don't understand it. I was like the sidekick sitting there, get me a screwdriver, right, or get me lunch. So I was also always okay with finding my niche. So, I think I liked the idea of business because it included people, and that was a strength for me.
Where do restaurants enter the equation for you while you're in college?
I started freshman year. I started to work at a bar in Washington, D.C. I started just as a busser, picking up beer mugs off tables, washing them, restocking, bar backing, then working the door. And I just fell in love with the business. I couldn't believe I got paid to go and hang out at the college bar. And I always liked cleaning. So, bussing tables, cleaning, mopping the floor. There's a real satisfaction in it.
The immediate result.
And I found I liked the work. I was just stunned. I couldn't believe I left at the end of the night with money in my pocket. It's great.
So you graduate with this degree. Do you start thinking, okay, it's an international business administration degree, let me start looking overseas, or does the work you're doing in restaurants get a hold of you and that's that?
You're spot on. The restaurant work, by junior year, I had a professor, one of my business professors, say to me, look, if you're not going to get an internship and you're going to keep spending all your free time working in these bars, you should work for a real restaurant corporation. To which I said, what is that? What do you mean? What are you talking about? I didn't really know anything, obviously. I was just a kid. And so he said, well, there's a whole industry of professional, corporately owned and corporately run restaurant chains, and that's where you should work if you enjoy this work, because these bars and clubs that you work in, what's it going to do for you when you graduate? And then at TGI Fridays announced that they were opening. I saw flyers. This was there was no internet, This was 1990. So I saw TGI Fridays was opening on campus, and I did a little homework, and wow, that's a restaurant corporation. And I applied for a job there. That's what really, they got their claws into me, and I never looked back. So they offered me a job to go into management 5 months before graduation, like upon graduation. So I had a job offer in hand before graduation, and I let go of all my other thoughts at that point. I was like, oh, this is going to be great.
So you've talked about your start in the restaurant industry, and you can't believe you get to work here and they're going to pay you, that sort of thing. Once you start learning about the business of restaurants, do you have an early epiphany of some sort? Is there an early eye-opening moment for you as you learn, this is how restaurants are run, this is what the cost is, this is what the revenue is, this is what the failure rate is? Like, do you have an early, like, oh, okay, this is the key?
So 2 things come to mind. One, earlier when I was still in high school and then in college, when I would be home for the summer, I worked at my girlfriend's parents' newsstand, deli, convenience store. And her dad taught me how to take inventory, including how to sharpen a pencil, how to have the details written out on the sheets, how to use the clipboard, how to really count everything, how to add up the value of the inventory in the computer, and how to understand if inventory was lost or sold. And I was just fascinated. I was making steak and cheese and working the register.
Right.
So that really showed me, like, wow, there's a behind the scenes, the math, the product, the shrink, the loss. So that lesson stuck with me. And then I had a mentor when I was at Fridays. And again, it was around food cost, inventory, loss, yield, understanding, like, you weigh the potatoes when you buy them and how many do we, cut into fries. And when I was at Fridays, everything was made from scratch. So, and I was fascinated. And then we had to really track labor hours. And I was fascinated with, like, the hours and the cost and the productivity. And don't schedule people until you need them. And that sort of merged in with my love for, I just liked the hospitality part, but that's where the business part, it all got clear for me.
Well, and in particular with restaurants, and even with the convenience store, you're taking inventory. Some of this stuff is perishable. Some of the convenience store things that you might find in a drugstore, that sort of thing, pain reliever or paper towels, that can sit on the shelf for a long time. But the food,
the food's perishable. But also, what I learned is people steal stuff, and things get lost with no malice. Things just, even stuff that's shelf stable seems to evaporate, or it gets damaged, or it arrives broken. So, and then certainly perishability became a big part of me understanding how to control the business.
I want to read a quote of yours that I found. This is from an interview that you did in 2019 at your alma mater. And here's the quote. Entrepreneurship is like a giant ongoing kick in the teeth. You take your kicks in the teeth and say, all right, if that's the cover charge to the party, I'm in. First of all, I love the imagery. But secondly, I feel like that should just be shared with every college student who's taking an intro to business class, who is thinking about going into entrepreneurship, starting their own business. And I love the fact that you framed it, not just the visual of being kicked in the teeth, but this is the cost. This is the cover charge. Because I think there are things in life that we think of as penalties, and they're not penalties. They're the cost of doing business.
I still exactly believe that. I think I got it right when I said that, in 2019. And it's not the penalty. It's not the tax. It's just the price of admission. And the best stuff is not just sitting out available. The best stuff is behind a door, down a hallway, up a hill, after a rainstorm. We must get through. And so, as long as you understand the context and the prize is worth the path isn't the problem. It's, so it's funny, right? I guess it's a privilege to get kicked in the teeth if this is what then you get a chance to do.
I remember hearing the phrase farm to table. I remember hearing about your first restaurant and thinking to myself, I know what those words mean individually, and I think I understand what the concept is, but it took me a while to sort of figure out what farm to table actually meant. Because part of, I imagine, starting a restaurant is differentiation. How are we going to make people get out of the habit of whatever their favorite restaurants are and come to try our restaurant? So what was it about this idea that made you think, from a business standpoint, I think this will resonate with people?
So first I want to clarify that when you ask me, the pronoun you is you plural.
Yes.
And so if I use the word I, there is no I
Right.
in Founding Farmers.
Right.
Literally,
You and
this
your
is-
co-founders.
Yeah, this is me, my partner Mike V, and the North Dakota Farmers Union. And Founding Farmers, I could never have done this on my own. Aside from not wanting to have, I don't really like doing things on my own. I don't really like being alone. I'm a team person. But I think that one of the unique things that makes Founding Farmers is the DNA of the founders and the sentiment and the intent of that DNA. And so it's me, it's my partner Mike, and then it's our partner, the North Dakota Farmers Union, and their leadership, Mark Watney and board members and other farmer investors. And I think Founding Farmers represents the best of us and represents 1 + 1 is 5, and the collaboration of their DNA as American family farmers, Mike and I's DNA as restaurateurs, maybe some of my DNA of caring about the planet and environmentalism, Mike's DNA of his ability to sort of see the future of food and people. Mike's he's a business savant with the way that we do our complex operations. And so if there's one thing that makes Founding Farmers unique, it's the culture that then emanates from that seed.
Coming up, you're going to hear Dan talk about what he bought that made him happy, and you're going to hear about the time that he got scammed. We got into a lot of stuff in this conversation, and ironically, considering his line of work and the fact that we were sitting in one of his restaurants, we didn't talk about food. I feel like I blew it because I could have asked him all kinds of questions because food is one of my favorite things to talk about, and I could have told him about Marmar. It's my favorite condiment. I add it to breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I've said it before, when it comes to chili garlic crunch, Marmar is my favorite because it is so versatile. You can go with the original Marmar, which has amazing flavors. And if you're like me and you want that heat, get the spicy version. You got to try it. Go to ilovemarmar.com. Get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY. You can click the link in the show notes or go to ilovemarmar.com. Get 10% off when you use the promo code MONEY. Make your taste buds happy, people. All right, let's get back to the conversation with Dan Simons. You're married. You and your wife have 3 kids.
True.
To what extent did the two of you talk about money before you got married?
Money for me is similar to any other topic, including the topics that I recognize lots of people find them difficult to talk about. Like, I was raised by 2 doctors. I was raised in a conversationally and emotionally liberal, safe environment. So not liberal necessarily in the politics term or that, but in a, share liberally and communicate, and feelings and thoughts are to be expressed and questions are to be asked.
Which, as someone of a similar age who grew up in New England in the 1970s, that's not the norm. That's
No, it's not the norm.
I'm assuming you have had that thought reinforced to you as you have moved out throughout your life, that I grew up in a different household where we talked about things more openly.
For all of us, all we know at first is that the household we're raised in is normal, because that's all we know. What I learned, probably by 5th or 6th grade, as friends started to come over and I started to spend more time at other friends' houses, is that my situation at home wasn't common. And we could say what we wanted. There was no kids' table to sit at. It wasn't like shut up and don't talk, or there was none of that. And so my friends liked hanging out at my house. They talked to my parents. And because we could talk about everything medically, I think it was just easier then to talk about everything. And I will say that money was stressful for my dad, and I saw my dad's anxiety about money. You know, they came from England. They grew up in World War II, and so they had a diligence and a fear around money that they were cautious, and they weren't American capitalists, and so they didn't have a sort of consumer spending mindset. But what I saw was that my dad's anxiety around money seemed dysfunctional, and I noticed it as out of character for everything else we talked about. So your question was, you know, when Susie and I got married, you know, did we talk about money beforehand? We talked about everything beforehand, and that was very new to her. She grew up in a loving home, but whether it was talking about money or talking about sex or talking about anything that often isn't easy for a lot of parents to talk about, she got exposed to me pretty quickly that let's talk about it. And that, I think, became Susie's natural state as well.
And did you find that you were, you know, once you get over the initial, no, we actually are going to talk about this, did you find you were on similar wavelengths?
Susie is more conservative financially. She grew up with less money. You know, my parents were both doctors, and so while they didn't spend, and our neighbors wouldn't necessarily have known how much money our parents had in the bank, we could have what we wanted, and we weren't stressed, and they paid for us to go to college, and it was like super fortunate. And Susie didn't. You know, she had to pay for college herself, and she commuted to Maryland for a couple of years. She's from the Maryland area. So she found, and maybe still finds, my ease of spending and my low stress around money, that can be hard for her. And now that we have to we raise kids. And so I do use money a little differently in parenting. And sometimes she has to kind of wrap her head around that. And I do learn from her as well. And so I think we're a good balance with money. But I would say she's gotten closer to me than I've gotten closer to her stance with regard to talking about it, using it, and feeling not stressed about it.
Can you share an example of how you use money in parenting?
I will use money to prove a point to my kids about what they're capable of. For example, if one of my kids is like struggling to finish their homework or do their homework or accomplish it on time or get focused, I will say to them, okay, I'll give you $20. I'll take out a $20 bill, like show them the money. You can have this $20 bill if you take the next 45 minutes and finish that work and then show it to me. And Susie thinks that just sort of short circuits her for a bunch of reasons. And my point is, hey, if it's a motivator and it gets the kid to prove to themselves that they can accomplish it, it's not going to cost me $20 again. Tomorrow and next week, I'm going to say, now I know you can do it. Do it.
Right.
I know you know. So I'll use it to help people get evidence. I'll use it as a motivation, and I don't mind it as a reward. There's plenty of chores that I won't pay for. Like, you just do it. You're part of the family. Like, do your part. And there's other stuff where I think money is a good motivator, and I don't mind putting like dollar values on things and saying, do the grind, get the thing.
Who mows the lawn at home? Is it the kids, or is it you because you love how it feels?
No, now it's a company called, Landscape Projects Incorporated. I used to really worry. Now, when the kids were little, we had a lawnmower, and I mowed the lawn because we couldn't afford to pay someone else to mow the lawn. Like when we were starting our business, Susie and I were broke. And then it just became a time value thing for me. And I used to worry, like, my kids aren't going to know how to mow the lawn. But there's a lot of things that my kids don't know how to do that you and I grew up in the 70s and the 80s and we learned to do that I have sort of come around to. It doesn't matter. I used to worry, like, are they going to know how to change a light bulb? Well, the reality is by the time they own their own homes, light bulbs won't need to be changed. These LED bulbs don't go out. So I try to teach them, you do need to know how certain things work. And you've got to be willing to use your hands. But I think I've evolved a little bit with my own thing of there's some stuff our kids aren't going to know how to do that isn't going to matter.
Let's go into the speed round. What is a thing that you have bought that makes you happy?
A thing I've bought that makes me happy?
I think money can buy happiness.
Oh, for sure, money can buy happiness. Well, the first thing that comes to mind right now is my dog. I am in love with my Portuguese water dog. His name's Kobe. Kobe costs $3,500 to buy as a puppy. And what a great use of money to add that little guy to my life.
Have you made a purchase that you regret and sometimes you still think about?
Well, I got scammed when I was a teenager. We were outside like playing baseball, and some older kids, probably college, sort of drove by, pickup truck, and they had a bunch of stereo speakers in the back. And, we used to listen to tunes, right? We were cranking Ozzy and AC/DC, this is the 80s, and I'm probably 16 years old, maybe. And they were like, hey, basically they pitched me like, we've got these high value things. It's like I bought the emotion of like, this is like this amazing opportunity to buy these things. Now, I realized later, like, wait, did I just buy stolen products? Did I just buy actually like low quality stereo speakers? I don't know. But literally they convinced me to buy this. And I went down to the bank. I lived in a little town in New England. I went down to the bank to take money out and paid them. And in hindsight, and I'll never forget it, I got caught up in the emotion of the purchase, which really means I fell victim to their sales process. And while the speakers worked, I don't know that there were anything special about them. And again, whether they were stolen or just cheap, but I overpaid, my lesson was someone else's desire to sell should not equate my desire to buy.
What is one thing about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
I wish in the early 90s I had have learned that stock markets crash, because by the late 90s, I was building my career and working for other people, but I was saving my money and I was investing my money using Fidelity, and I was putting money into mutual funds. And, some of those funds at the time had 5% fees, but they were going up like rocket ships. And then when the dot-com bubble burst, I lost really, I don't know, probably $60,000, which had been like 10 years of savings. So I just didn't know that the stock markets crash, and I thought, oh, you can just invest your money and make your money. So I wish I learned that sooner.
What is the last thing that you splurged on just for yourself? Not for your family or anyone else, just for you?
Just for me.
Just for you?
Just for me. I mean, I bought myself a sweet car.
Nice.
I bought a Lucid. I wanted an electric car, and I felt like it was a splurge, and no one else in my family really benefited it or was interested or whatever. And so I felt like, you know what? I'm just going to treat myself.
That's what splurging is. And I'm sure your family was like, good for you. You enjoyed that. That's not for us. You enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think the kids thought it was cool. I think Susie thought, really? That's your best idea?
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
Well, my favorite charitable cause to support is simply mentorship for those who otherwise wouldn't have access to a mentor. And so it's about giving time and sharing experiences and knowledge and wisdom, and really just seeing someone and participating in their journey. That's my favorite place to give. I certainly write plenty of checks, to nonprofits for causes, but that's what came up for me. The way you asked that question is, I think the gift of helping people on their journey is my favorite charitable thing to do.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Well, I loved the show Billions. It was just fascinating. I loved Succession. I am well aware of the destruction that dysfunction around money causes. And I'm happy to watch it and be entertained by it. And I do feel grateful that for the way that I was raised, that money is not something for me that is ever going to destroy relationships or jam me up inside myself or interpersonally.
Last thing is a penny for your thoughts. And this can be about money, but it doesn't have to be. It's simply advice that you can share with anyone who is listening. Any bit of wisdom you've picked up on your own journey that you can share with people.
Certainly what I have learned is that value is created by giving value, not by trying to make value.
Can you share the difference? Because I think I know what you mean, but I would rather be clearer about what you mean.
I guess the simplest explanation is I take that karma view of value creation, and I think I can make my restaurant value go up by investing in my partnership with Mike, by supporting him, by lifting him up, by making him the most successful and effective. And so it's a way of giving support so that the outcome is rising value. If I want my servers to raise the check average, sell another dessert, I don't manage the dessert sales. I manage the purpose and the priorities of the person, of the employee, with the belief that as they rise up, they perform the function and lift up and create the value.
There you go. If you want to learn more about Dan, check out his personal website, dansimonsays.com. And if you find yourself in the Washington, D.C. area and you're looking for a great meal, get yourself to a Founding Farmers restaurant. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.